Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod. We're coming to you live from our new studio in Woodland Hills, and I'm so excited to be here with you this morning. We got a big show for you. You know, I know it's not officially the end of summer, but it really almost is, right? We're getting right down to it. And all summer long, we've been doing these very special parent-to-parent shows, and we're continuing with that today. We've got a topic that I really love talking about. I call this the Manifesto Talk. But it's really how to handle your busy schedule, because this is a part of it, right? And I got to say out the gate, this isn't just for families dealing with autism. This is anybody dealing with a busy schedule, and everyone's got a busy schedule. So we're going to be talking about that in just a second. And I want to say that it's part one of a two-part series that we're going to end up with on Wednesday. We're going to finish off the parent-to-parents for now. We might revisit it from time to time, but the series, we're going to put a period at the end of it. On Wednesday, we're going to be talking about how to deal with parent stress. So, but I don't think you can even begin to talk about the parent stress until you've talked about the schedule, because the schedule is one of the most stressful things. So they kind of go hand in hand, and it's like, which do you talk about first, the chicken or the egg? I've decided that this is the one first, so we're going to be talking about that in just a second. But before we do anything, we have to, I can't believe I didn't lead with this, we have to say a very happy birthday to Dr. Temple Grandin. I'm going to call her in a little while, not on the show, but after the show, to wish her a very happy birthday. I was so bummed because I thought how amazing that on her birthday they were going to have the launch of the Artemis, and then they had to scrap it this morning and put it on hold because they were having fuel leakage problems. You know, a reason why you would scrap it for the day. But I thought, how amazing is that? What a wonderful birthday present for Dr. Grandin. But, you know, she'll get a late birthday present. I think they're talking about Friday now if all goes well. Good morning, Asia, and good morning, Susie B. Join me in wishing Dr. Grandin a happy birthday because that's amazing. We celebrate her as a wonderful teacher, a wonderful woman, and a wonderful voice in our community. So thrilled that we can do that this morning. Also want to say that we're live right now on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and about a dozen other sites. Traven's going to show you what some of those are, along with places that you can watch us either live or in podcasts. Thank you, Asia, for saying happy birthday to Dr. Grandin. We are the #1 rated autism podcast, and we are a free download wherever you get your podcasts. If there is some place that you don't see us, it's for one of two reasons. Either we just don't know and we need for you to fill us in, or it's a subscription for people that have to belong to the site. And we're trying very hard, very hard to remain free for all of you, because we think that that's a really important element of this show, that the information is available to you for free. If you're tuning in to watch the show for the first time, I'm Shannon Penrod. I'm a proud pony, and you know, we're inviting all of you guys to be ponies with us. For me, pony is parent of a neurodiverse individual, although it can also mean partner of neurodiverse individuals, right? I like to identify as both. Good morning, Laurie. You know, I always like to be very clear. We make lots of time and space here on the show. Oh, look, there's some of the ways that you can subscribe and watch, and Traven's going to keep showing you those. We try to make as much room as we possibly can for individuals on the spectrum to have their voice on the Autism Network. In fact, there is their own show, which is called Stories from the Spectrum, which is only voices from the spectrum. You will never hear my voice or see me on camera because I am not a person on the spectrum, and that is only the viewpoint of people who are in the neurodiverse community for that show. And on this show, we try to make as much time and room and space for those individuals to have their voice as well. I do contend that there is a whole other part of the autism community that is people who love individuals who are on the autism spectrum, and that we also have challenges that we face, and we want information. Let's be honest. I think part of being a good ally is asking questions and wanting information. And I think that perspective is 9/10 of everything. And as much as I think it's essential that we hear the perspective of people who are on the spectrum, I think the perspective of parents, caregivers, loved ones, boyfriends, girlfriends is unique and valid, not to overshadow their perspective, but that we work in tandem. So that's the perspective that I'm coming from. Always want to stay in my lane. I don't ever want to be speaking for individuals who are on the autism spectrum, but I want to speak to the parent experience, because that is what I am. My son was diagnosed at 2.5, and I did not know what to do, where to go, who to get help from. And I struggled for several years, not with my child. Can we just be very clear that when we talk about stress for parents of individuals on the spectrum, and when we talk about the challenges that we face, it's not our kids. It is not our kids. Our kids are fabulous. We don't need to change them. We don't need to have them be any different than who they are. However, they have a right to learn. They have a right to grow. And we have a responsibility to try to find ways to help them to learn and grow. Not change, learn, grow, learn skills, right? Not change. And finding those resources, that's stressful. That's the challenge. That's where we end up having our problems, is that we're trying to fight for our kids to get what is rightfully theirs. So how do you manage that? And how do you manage the schedule? It's a lot. It's a lot. And I'm not an expert. I always like to give that disclaimer at the start of the show that I'm not an expert in autism or much, but I have been a parent for only 19 years. And 16 of that has been, 16 and a half of that has been since he was diagnosed. And I've been hosting shows about autism for over 10 years. So I've picked up a trick here and a tip here and a few things, and learned some things along the way that I like to share in case they can help you. So that's, when we do these parent-to-parent talks, that's where I'm coming from. Always like to do full disclaimer about that, right? Okay. We are going to get started with this talk in just a second, but before we do, I always like to say to you guys that our mission here is to provide information and inspiration. And so I've been on a little bit of a tear lately. I'm trying to make sure that everybody gets this really good, important information. So if you have heard it, first of all, if you've heard it and you haven't taken action, I'm going to ask you today to take action, right? But more importantly, if you've heard it and you've already taken action, I really need for you to share this information. And if you're hearing it for the first time, I'm glad that you're here and that we can share this. What am I talking about? A couple of months ago, we covered a study that was it was put out by the National Institutes for Health. It was conducted by Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. And what it showed was that babies exposed to acetaminophen during pregnancy have a significantly higher risk of being diagnosed with autism later on. So that is very interesting information, and it's information that we all need to be aware of. And as a result of that study, and believe me, studies are ongoing about this, right? Because we need more information. That's 100% sure. But as a result of that study, here's what the U.S. Food and Drug Administration did. They urged careful consideration before using any pain-relieving products during pregnancy. So first out the gate, we as humans on this planet need to tell all of our women friends about this and make them aware of the fact, because you know how they come out with a study and they go, here's information, and if you miss that thing, then you may not know. So we have a responsibility to tell the women in our lives about this, that there is a concern about pain-relieving medicines during pregnancy. But I'm also concerned for all of you that I love and know, and some of you that I only know in spirit, that you did everything during your pregnancy like your doctor told you to do, and you were told that taking acetaminophen in things like Tylenol or Excedrin was completely safe, and so you did, and now you have 1, 2, Some of you have 4 and 5 children on the spectrum, right? And so what do you do now as a result of these new findings? And again, as I said, research is ongoing. So I want to make sure that you guys get this really important information and that you share it with your friends. I'm going to read this to you because it's important. If you or a loved one used Tylenol or other medications containing acetaminophen while pregnant and later gave birth to a child diagnosed with autism, you may be entitled to financial compensation. Yes, that's what I said. So the law firm of Shapiro Legal Group is now evaluating potential legal claims by parents of autistic children. And I personally am urging you to call them. Shapiro Legal Group, call them today to see if you may qualify for financial compensation. And please spread this message to your friends in the community who might be unaware. Very important that you guys understand that there are time deadlines to file a claim, so I'm urging you not to wait. The moment is now. So what do? You can reach Shapiro Legal Group at 888-657-0455. Again, that number, 888-657-0455. You can also contact Shapiro Legal Group by going to their website and filling out a form. The website is shapirolegalgroup.com/autism. And I have to read you this disclaimer because thank you, Asia, for putting it in there, 888-657-0455. Yep, I have to read you this because it's legal stuff. I got to read you this disclaimer. Shapiro Legal Group, PLLC, associates with attorneys throughout the country to help people nationwide, is licensed in New York and Washington, D.C., and has its principal offices at 60 East 42nd Street, New York, New York, and that this ad was read by a non-attorney spokesperson. I am the non-attorney spokesperson. I like that. And you just saw that disclaimer on the screen as well. Louise, hello from Massachusetts. Yes. Okay. So super duper important. Just checking in with everybody. Michelle, how are you? So thrilled that you guys are here. So don't feel guilt. Can I just say a word about this? If you took, like me, if you took Tylenol while you were pregnant, this is not about guilt. This is, you did your level best, you did what you were told to do, and, but now it's about advocating for yourself and your child to see, right? And so the best thing to do is to call them and just start a discussion to see if you're somebody who may be entitled to financial compensation. But this is not about guilt. There is no guilt, yeah? We do the best we can on the day that we can. And when we know better, we do better, right? But this is why we share information with the women in our lives so that they know and can make better choices for themselves. All right, that's, we're saying hello to my creepy bobblehead. I don't know. I want to be as skinny as she is, but her head is very big. I just want to say, because she's a bobblehead. And sometimes I'm a bubblehead. Yeah, it's true. Okay, but there are some things that I've learned along the way. Here I go with shaking my pointed, I don't mean to be shaking a pointed finger at you. But one of the things that I learned, it's so funny. Before I had a child who was diagnosed on the spectrum, I was very interested in some things, and I was interested in being successful and what does success mean? What does that mean and to anyone on a given day? And so I would take these classes and study these things about how to maximize and be efficient, and I never did any good at it. I never got anything done. I had things that were half finished, and I was a procrastinator and all of these things. Then all of a sudden, I have a child who's diagnosed on the spectrum, and everything came into sharp focus that I was like, I need to use everything in my tool bag. And suddenly I became much more interested in the advice that people had been giving me for 20 years about how to be more effective. You know why? Because I had to be. I didn't really have a choice anymore because it wasn't just about me. Where are my tissues? I'm already going to get weepy. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about my kid too. So I started to use some of the things that I'd learned over the years, and I found that, son of a gun, they worked. And that if I worked those tools and it was just like almost really all it was a mental shift and getting clear, that then I could see where we were making progress and I could map our progress. And one of the things that I've said all along was that if I could apply the things that I did while we were doing autism intervention to the rest of my life, I would be wildly successful. I'm still working on that, but I do feel like it's important to share with all of you the things that I did apply during autism that were helpful, as well as sharing the things that were not helpful, because, those are time sucks, right? The things that aren't helpful. I got to mop down. Okay, so this is called the Manifesto Talk, and we're talking about how to handle the really hectic, busy schedule, all right? So let's launch into this, shall we? There we go. And I don't know, I'm doing this new thing with the PowerPoints, and so I think you got to click it again for the words to come up. Traven, because there's no words on the screen, but it's, I have to hit it again. It's me. There we go. Managing your hectic schedule. And again, this is called the Manifesto Talk, because I got to tell you something. You're either going to run the schedule or the schedule's going to run you right into the gutter. And if you doubt that, somebody write in now and tell me how hard it is with the schedule and how much of your life is complicated because the schedule is so hard. Tell me right now if I'm dreaming here. Did I just advance it and you did too, Traven? Am I one ahead? I'm going to go back for a second. Yeah, no, okay. Okay, so first of all, let's do just a little bit of a reality check here that right now, in this time and space, in 2022, it's hectic for everybody. And it is extra headache. Like more than it was before. There's more to contend with than there was before. I can remember as we were leading up to the lockdown and COVID saying to somebody, sometimes I just feel like we're spinning. We're all spinning, and it's like, where does it end? Where does it stop? And then, of course, COVID came along and asked us all to slow down. But not all of us, right? A lot of you had to keep working. I kept working. Some people were like slowed down and couldn't do things. Other people were, twice as essential. And it was crazy, hectic in a weird way, right? And now we're back to the new normal. And I'm finding that a lot of people, myself included, are finding it even more hectic because there are some things that you have to do extra because we're still a little bit in the new normal and all the things aren't there, right? But we're like half in, half out, and we don't know what the rules are, which makes it extra hard. And, there are random rules and there's random shortages and things. And if one more person says to me, well, we're not, you go to a business and you ask them for something that you could have had before and they say, oh, we're not able to do that right now. And you go, why? And they go, well, COVID. And I just want to go, deal, cope, find a new way. What are you waiting for? But, so it's hectic for everybody. So let's just take that as a base. And then if it's already hectic for everyone and you have children, it adds. Just children in general adds to it because these are little individuals, they're little souls, they're little people, and they have needs too. So you have a need, you have to do something, and this little soul needs something too. And the more little souls that you have in your boat, it's that much more hectic, right? I love when people say, well, if my life looks full, what is the saying? Now I'm going to mess it up. If you think, it's something about if my life seems full, check my heart. My heart is more full. I don't know. It's something like that. But it's wonderful, right? You're blessed. You have all these children. But there's the potential for it to be hectic because everybody has an agenda, right? And then if anyone in this scenario, whether it is the parent, you might have a grandparent in your boat, or your children, if anybody has special needs, medical needs, individual needs on top of the normal, and I hate that word, the normal, but you know what I'm saying, then it is just extra. It is extra headache and it becomes essential. Now we move into the category of, well, I might have maybe just been able to manage the schedule, catch as catch can, but now when you add these things into it, you're in the space that I was in, where you no longer get the choice. Now it becomes essential that you manage the schedule. And I've given us the tortoise and the hare here because it's not just about getting something done. It's about the slow race. It's about maintaining so that nobody falls apart. That's really what it's about. I'm not trying to sell you on being a type A person. I'm trying to sell you on managing like your stress and the way you feel about it and getting done the things that are essential and important. Okay, so the first thing that we have to do before we do anything else is get clear. And when I say clear, lots of people have lots of different phrases for this. I always ask you guys, what's your why? Why are you doing this? Because sometimes when you're just doing, you forget, oh, what was the purpose of this? Because it's really easy to get off on a tangent. I don't know, maybe that's just me, but it's really easy to find yourself running, and forgetting what the purpose of why you were running was. So I ask you all the time, what are your priorities? What are your values? What's the most important to you? And when we can answer these questions first before anything else, I think it's good for the soul, and I think it's good to take that breath and go, okay, what's important to me? If you are in a relationship with other people, it's super important, I think, to get on this page. When people ask me, how are my husband and I still married? I will tell you it's because we have discussions about this. I don't think it's our favorite thing in the world. I don't mean to make it sound like it's like, woohoo, this is party time. But I find that it's funny because I always say that I never love my husband more than when we're at Disneyland. And we used to go to Disneyland on a pretty regular basis when my son was little. We lived in Southern California. It was really affordable to get a year pass and then go in the afternoon. It was so much less expensive than maybe going to, like the Chuck E. Cheese once a month, right? I will say that as much as I love Disney, I don't think that it's that same way anymore. I think it's gotten a little pricey for people in Southern California to do that. But that was what we used to do as our thing. We didn't go on vacations, but we bought a year pass to Disney and we would take our son there as a reward. It was very rewarding for him. It was very rewarding for us. And as I said, I would always say I never love my husband more than I do when we're at Disneyland, because part of it is that in the car ride down, we would have this kind of a discussion. Like, what's important to us? Why is it important to us? Do we feel like we're on track? Do we, what needs to change? We would check in about how are you doing and really have a conversation. We were stuck in traffic no matter what. And so it made the time go quicker, and it was like that bonding moment. Then we would get to Disneyland and let it all go and just enjoy being together and being with our kiddo. But I'm not lying. I do think that part of it was that we got and this is a thing that you got to check in on a regular basis because it changes. Our kids change, our lives change, our priorities change, right? So you want to be asking yourself, what is all of this? What's important to you? What's important to your significant other? What's important to the other people in your boat? Your kids, if you're taking care of a loved one or a parent, include them as well. So what my husband and I did early on after autism came to our house was we made a manifesto. And a manifesto, you can see there on the screen, it says a written statement declaring publicly the intentions, motives, or views of its user. Now, a lot of times, when we think of the word manifesto, a lot of times it's used for candidates when they're running for office and they put out what it is that they plan to do. It is, notice that it's what they plan to do, it's not what they actually do, right? In fact, we get fatootsed at them because, well, you said you were going to do this and you did something else. But stuff happens and intervenes. And I want to keep drilling on that because I think people get nervous. Well, if I write it down on a piece of paper, then I have to do it. No, you don't. But I love this picture and wanted to use it because, first of all, I love lavender fields. My goodness, how beautiful is that? For you, those of you listening in podcasts, we have just rows upon rows of lavender, but there's a gorgeous, I think it's an olive tree in the far, far distance. And, you know, we all have some place that we want to get to. And we want the journey to be good, right? Because one thing I have learned on this planet, I'm going to be 60 here in a couple of weeks. Stop. I know. I don't look a day over 59. But one of the things that I've learned, and I have to relearn, is that it isn't just about the arrival. It's also about the journey. And so this is what I wish for you. The journey, I want you to be able to see the tree in the distance, but to be walking through lavender fields to get there. Because if you don't enjoy the journey, when you get to wherever you're going, it just isn't the same. So make a manifesto. And the manifesto says, where are we going? And it's going to help you determine what is the best way to get there. That's really what the whole thing about a manifesto is. Because, you know, I always use the example of a plane takes off from Los Angeles and it's on its way to New York. And, you know, we have planes that do that every single day, probably every single hour. And they all miraculously somehow end up landing at the airport that they want to in New York. But the reality is that most of the time that the airplane is in the air, it's off course. It's almost never exactly on course. So how do they actually arrive? They keep making course adjustments so that they're enough on course or close enough to course so that when they get to the arrival, they can land. And that's really what we have to do with autism. We have to know where we're going, and then we have to be able to make little course corrections. But it's hard because you can find yourself in the middle of the schedule, and it's like, you get so caught up in the schedule, you're just on that treadmill, and you're not really sure anymore where you're going. But I'm here to tell you that if we get 100% clear on what's important, sure, it's going to take you a little time to figure that out, but that time is going to be so well spent, and I'm going to give you some examples before we're done. So make the manifesto. I really don't want to leave the slide with the lavender because I love this picture. We need to get a picture of this somewhere in the studio, Traven, because I love it. Okay, so here are the steps to creating a manifesto. I try to make this as easy as possible. So the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to make a list of all the things that are important to you, and you're going to include everybody in the family who can and will participate. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. When my son was 2.5 and diagnosed with autism, and my husband and I sat down to do this for the first time, my husband wasn't as into it as I was, but I was desperate. I was grasping at straws. And my son was 2.5 and he was nonverbal. So he did not participate in that first time because I didn't know how to communicate with him to get him to participate. So you start from wherever you are. But if your kiddo is someone who can participate, I will tell you that later on, I don't know how old Jem was the first time that we had him participating with us. But I can tell you he was about 9, 10, 11 the first time that I made him do it in truth with us, where I made him sit down and list everything that was important to him, everything. And the reason why I did it then was because all he wanted to do was play video games. That's all he wanted to do all the time. And I would say, come on, we got to go to the store. And he would say, I don't want to go to the store. I want to play my video game. Come on, we got to go to school. I don't want to go to school. I want to play my video game, right? So there were all these things that I wanted to pull him away to do, and he didn't want to do it because of the video game. So I said, let's make a list of everything that's important to you. And I made a list, and my husband made a list, and then we both, we all read them out loud to each other, and then we did the subsequent steps. But I can tell you, it became very clear to him very quickly what was going on. So first thing, without questioning it, just list everything that's important to you, and forgive yourself when you leave things off the list. It's going to happen. So you just make a first list, and we're not going to hold you to it, but you do this. Okay, step 2, as a family, you're going to go through the list, and you're going to put numbers next to each one of the things on the list, and number 1 is the most important. And I'm going to tell you what's going to happen is that you're going to put something and then you go, oh, wait a second, but this is more important than that. So you're going to be scratching out a lot. Don't worry about that. Make a mess on the paper. It's perfectly okay. Now this, for my son, I'm going to guess he was probably 10. This became really, really difficult for him because picking what's most important is hard. Because when you say this is most important, you're saying something else isn't. And he struggled with this, as do most of us. He really had a hard time. So you want to be mindful and not put your kids through so much stress about it and help them, right? And you're going to help yourself by, I'm going to sneeze. You're going to remind yourself over and over and over, this is just an exercise and I can change it later if it doesn't work, right? But I'm going to use this as a guide, but follow your gut on this, right? That as you start to look at things, ask yourself, does that make sense? Is that the most important thing to me right now? If, you know, just ask yourself that. You don't have to ask yourself, am I making this the most important thing right now? Is this how I'm living my life? Those questions are going to come later on. But in the beginning, keep your stress level down and just try to see what's most important. And you want to decide this as a family as much as possible, right? But you're not all going to be in agreement. And as your kids get older, you can make room. They can have a different number one than you do. That can work because they have a life outside of you when you're not with them. So make room for all of that. We're expanding how we're looking at our goals, right? But you make the list and you get to the point where you're like, okay, I think we're in agreement. At least, you know, for myself, I know what my number one, my two, I would say you got to get like your top 15. And you might find that there's 100 things on your list. Can I tell you the first time somebody did a values workshop with me? Now they have them all over the place and they really have them for autism parents. And this is really what we're talking about, is doing a values workshop. But I was in graduate school and there was a teacher who came in to work with my class, and I went to school for acting. So I know. So it's an acting class. And this movement teacher comes in and he says, okay, we're going to do this workshop today. And he hands us out a list of things that he had made. There were all kinds of things that may or may not be important to you. There were things on there like fame and money and closeness with your children and true love and the ideal setting and closeness to God and brotherhood of man and peace on earth. And I mean, there was just like everything you could think of, right, on this list of things. And he said, I'm giving all of you, he gave us poker chips, and he said, you know, you now have 100 points among your poker chips, and now we're going to open bidding on each one of these things. And if you win it, you get it for life. And if you don't win it, you don't get it. And it was so interesting. Here were these people that I had been with already for 2 years, and we began to bid against each other to get these things. And, you know, one person discovered that there was one thing that was super duper important to him on the list. He wanted closeness to God. And he was like, if I have that, then I have everything else on this list in all the ways that I need it. So he hoarded his points. And when that one came up, he very quickly was the first person to bid 100 points so that he would get it. And he did. He won it, and then it was his forever, but he didn't get to bid on anything else. And it was fascinating as we went around the room when we were done to see what everybody got on their list. If you're curious as to what I ended up with peace of mind and the ideal setting. I thought, if I'm sitting in, and I probably was picturing exactly that lavender field with the olive tree in the distance, I thought, if I'm sitting there and I have peace of mind, then I have a great deal, right? I didn't have children then, and I certainly didn't have a son on the spectrum. I can tell you that I would have bid differently, and I would have said, I don't need to be in the ideal setting. I need health for my family, right? I would probably have bid first on that, right? So values change in time. We change in time. Don't be shocked if you find yourself wanting something that you didn't think that you wanted, right? But what happened with our son when we were making the list and he had video games on there was that even though I kept prompting him saying, I think video games are pretty important to you, I think you need to put it up higher on the list, he kept marking things in front of it. And I kept pointing that out to him and said, are you sure? Because if you're saying that school is more important than video games, but he got it. He totally, totally got it and said, no, Mom, school is more important than video games. And I no longer had to, when it was time to go to school, it was his choice. I would say, it's time to go to school, it's time to turn off the video game. And he would turn off the video game and we would go and get in the car and go to school because he had made the determination that that was more important to him. Yes, there are some kids who probably would pick video games being more important than school, but then you can deal with that too by making arrangements for them to be able to play video games in their time, and you show them that going to school is more important to you, and we build why school is more important. It's not the end of the road, right? Okay, so you make your list of what's most important to you. Then you're gonna edit, revise, discuss, edit, revise. Go through that period. I'll tell you, that's where all the gold is to be mined with your family. And again, some of you have kiddos that are not going to be able to sit and have the metaphysical discussion about, well, are the video games going to be more important than school? Truth is, my son couldn't really have that conversation with me at 10. I just know that he kept on saying that it wasn't his top priority. But there are ways that people communicate with us about what is important to them. Yeah? So keep editing and revising. Then finally, once you feel like as a family you've come to an understanding, now make a clean list. Because the other one's going to have scratches and numbers, So now make a clean list starting with number 1, put it all on one piece of paper, make it nice and legible so that people can read it, and then you need to hang that list somewhere in your household. Put it someplace in your household where you can refer to it. One of my favorite things to do is to open up a kitchen cabinet and tape something in there, because then it's not out there for the whole world to see if you want to keep it private, right? But it's, where to find it. That's what I say to do with your IEP and your BIP plan. You can put your manifesto there. I will tell you that when my son was in 5th grade, the teacher made all of the students write what was the two most important goals for the year for them that they wanted to achieve by the end of the year. And they had to type it up and they had to put it in a frame. And we hung that in our dining room, on the wall in our dining room for everybody to see. My son walked by it every day. And he achieved those 2 things on the wall. And I believe that part of it was because it was a constant reminder to him. I'm a big one for hanging signs all over the place to remind us. I, forever had the thing on our mirror in the bathroom that used to say that Jem's team is only as strong as the weakest player on the team, and that will not be me. And then there was another place where on my computer, actually, I had a sign that said, Jem will never be this age again. So because I can get lost in writing at my computer, and I was afraid I was going to miss his childhood, right? So I'm a big believer in hanging things in places where we will see them to remind us of what's important. And that's all this is, this manifesto. It's something that reminds us what we decided on that day was important to us. Okay, so the last thing is that you have to be willing to have this list be fluid. Yes, it's written down. It's not in stone. And there are going to be times when something's going to happen and there's going to be a discussion and it's going to get very clear for you where you're going to go, my gut says this is not what, even though it says here this is what's most important, my gut says something different. It's a great jumping off point for the discussion whenever there's conflict, because conflict is going to arise. So now what? I'm sorry, Traven. I'm going to start putting everything all on one side. I try to vary it, but I'm just making you crazy, aren't I? There we go. So now what? Now that you've got the the manifesto and it's hanging in the kitchen cabinet, like what do you do with it now? Well, the most important pivotal thing for you to do is you have to decide for today what calendar system you want to use. Now, I know people who are all about doing it on paper. There's something about writing on paper that is the act of writing puts it in their memory. I know people who keep bullet journals. I do sometimes, not all the time. I'm not religious about it. Some people are all about doing it on their devices, having the calendar, and that's where they can do it. I know at least one autism parent who got one of those ginormous calendars and put it on their wall, and it like took up their whole dining room. And they wrote everything on the ginormous calendar. I had clipboards. I don't know that that's what I would do now, but in the day, that's what made sense for me. There were 3 clipboards that hung on hooks in our dining room. And because it was the only way I could visualize it. There was one for my schedule, there was one for Jem's schedule, and there was one for my husband's schedule. Because I needed to know where everybody was at any given point on any given day. And so that's what I did. And my schedule became the family calendar, so that I would have Jem's schedule there, I would have Jim's schedule there, and then I made it a priority that I would build my life around theirs, because that's what I decided in the manifesto. Don't feel sorry for me. It's the choice that I made for that period of time. And I would build in events that were in there too. That became the family calendar that was my calendar. So once you have decided on your system of calendars, you're going to start to populate that calendar. And you're going to start by filling in the things that go with number 1. So if, for example, you said that your number one most important thing, good morning, Christina. If you said on the manifesto that the number 1 most important thing was health, because maybe somebody's having some health issues in your family. It's funny to me how we don't prioritize health until we have to, right? But let's say that health was the most important thing, then the first thing I would schedule on that list would be doctor's appointments. That would come before work, it would come before school, it would come before everything else, right? If you say on your manifesto that your religious life and your spirituality is the most important, then you might be somebody who schedules church and church events on your schedule first, right? So you're populating the calendar based on your values. It's interesting because usually we're told to put on the calendar the immovable things first, right? But that's kind of wrong, because then if it's immovable, why is it immovable? And if faith is the most important thing to you, then you're not going to schedule things, if you go to church on Sunday, you're not going to schedule things on Sunday because it's the most important thing. You see how this kind of works? So you populate those things on the calendar according to what's important to you. And you go down the list. Now, I'll tell you that there are lots of things, and the first time you do it, you're going to go, I forgot this. Like, I forgot travel time. I forgot to, because we have to get from point A to point B. Okay, don't sweat it. Go back and revise it, right? I will tell you that the things that people forget to put on the calendar are to schedule for family time and to schedule for self-care. But edit until it looks like something different than what it looked like before. I will tell you that you know that you've gotten it right when you don't feel the panic. When you sit down to do your calendar and you feel panic, you're in the wrong neighborhood, right? If you're going by values and what's most important to you, all of a sudden it'll go, oh my gosh, this is doable, except that there's going to be things that don't fit. We're going to talk about that in a second. So you might be asking yourself, Shannon, when you did this the first time, you said your, life was on the back burner. How did that happen? Because we sat down and we went round and round and round, my husband and I. And it was pretty clear to us early on that getting our son help and intervention was going to be a big portion of our day. And that as we were hearing people say, because he was 2.5 and people were saying, you need to get him to the point where he's doing 40 hours of ABA a week, and you have to be doing all these other things in the extra hours. And I remember going, how in the heck can that happen? How can he handle that? How can I handle it? How is this going to work? And I saw very quickly that it was not just going to be about automating it, that it was going to take a certain amount of management. I love Moira, who does Let's Talk Movies with us. She coined the phrase about being the project manager for autism, that somebody has to be elected to be the project manager. And I heard her say that, and I was like, pick me. I'm going to be the project manager for autism. And so, and that was my choice. Nobody forced me into that. That's what I chose. My husband and I at a certain point, I asked him, would you rather it be you? And he said, no, I don't, I'm afraid I'll mess it up. And I think, I think I should go to work and be the person who keeps the roof over the head. So we had two things that in the beginning were like, oh, we're not sure which one of these is the most important. But we decided that number one was that we keep a roof over our heads, that making sure that we weren't homeless, that was priority one. Now, doesn't that sound scary? Like even saying that, I want to tell you how scared I was. But that's what, and we saw that like that was happening for some people. And we had just seen the Will Smith movie, The Pursuit of Happiness, with him in the bus station, the subway station bathroom with his child. And I got to be honest with you, like we were terrified that that would happen. And we came close. Let me just tell you, we came real close. And I know many families that have experienced homelessness when they have a child or two on the spectrum. And we said, let's make that a priority, that we not become homeless. Because we thought if we're homeless, he's not going to have a place to do therapy, because back then therapy was only in the home. And that was what we listed was our number 2 priority. That nothing was going to get in the way of him getting his therapy, and being homeless would. So that's why not being homeless became one. That didn't mean that we needed to live in a palace, but we were not going to be homeless. And number 2 was that he was going to be therapy. So the first thing that went on the schedule was my husband's work schedule. And the second thing that went on the schedule was my son's ABA therapy schedule. And then everything else came after that. Everything else came after that. But I can tell you that family time was absolutely on the list. I can tell you that self-care for me was not on the list, and that was a mistake. Please don't be me. Learn from me. Don't be me. Put self-care on the list, right? And there were many, many, many other things that were on the list, but those were the top 2 things for years. For 4 years. Those were the top 2 things. And my career was like 12. Because my career, I needed to work to be able to help with number 1, right? But my career was way back at the back of the bus. Why is this important? Because stuff happens. And, I guess that's the next one. So, again, disclaimer, the calendar doesn't rule your life, your values do. And if it's not working, you have to revise. So if you find yourself constantly going, I don't like what's on the calendar, then it doesn't match your values, and you need to go back to the point. And you will know, there's like this crazy moment when you go, oh, what's next on the calendar? Right, it's that. And your body goes, good, right? Your stomach says, oh, good, I'm glad that's on the calendar, because it matches your values. And you will find I'm someone who can go very easy into resentment. I get mad at everybody and I get resentful. But if I'm truly living my value-driven calendar, I don't have that as much or at all. And somebody wrote in and said, I'm working on just staying married. That's not a bad thing to have on your list, staying together. That was on our list too. It just wasn't first and it wasn't second, but it was on the list. Having a spouse that is disconnected, no help. I'm trying hard not to just take my little and leave. And I'm sending you a hug, and I'm telling you that depending on if that is what's first, is making your marriage work, then by all means, I will tell you that for me, we made our decision and we said not being homeless was first and our son's therapy was second. If my marriage had, and this got very clear with my husband, if my marriage had in any way impinged on my son getting his therapies, it would not have survived, right? right? But my husband knew that and made the decision with me. And there were tough times. Like anybody who talks about marriage and says, oh, it's a picnic in the park is not experiencing marriage. It is not easy. And when you throw extra stress in, it's extra hard, right? But there were times when we made it work and got through tough times, because part of being homeless was if we had to pay 2 rents, that would have been harder. And that forced us and that was going to jeopardize number 2, which was his therapy. So, and I will tell you that sometimes I feel like number 2 became number 1. It was fluid. It kind of went back and forth. But because we both got clear on that, we both had to work together around those things. And I tell everybody, because we work this way, my marriage works best when we have strife. My husband and I have to work really hard when things are going well to not let things unravel, because we got very used to, we're going to work together because that's what works, and we've got to solve a problem. Boy, you got a problem, give it to us to solve. We are so good in the middle of a poop storm. Man, I'm amazed at how good we got at holding on to each other and getting through it. We struggle when everything's good, because it's like, oh, if everything's good, how do we make this work? What's most important? And we've had to go back and look at the manifesto a time or two and change. When I went back to work and started doing this show 11, almost 12 years ago now, some things changed, because now suddenly me getting to work is not number 12, right? It became much more important, and some of the people in my household had trouble with that. And we had to go back and reevaluate, look at stuff, right? So you revise, you write, and if it's not working, it's because somewhere we haven't clearly identified what the most important values are. Okay, so the manifesto is the guide, not the law, and stuff is going to happen. The time that I think of always the most was, there was a day that my husband came home and he was so excited. He'd been cast in a movie and he was, thrilled. He's got lines in a movie. This is so exciting. And he says, I think I have to turn it down. I said, why? Why would you do that? Why would you turn down a movie? And he said, because I have to go out to the desert for like a week to film it. And I said, yeah. And he said, then I'm not going to be here to help you to get Jem to his therapies and all the things that have to happen. And I said, okay, let's pull out the manifesto. Let's take a look at this. Number 1 is that we not are homeless. They're going to pay you more to go to the desert for a week than you get paid at your regular job. And the truth of the matter is, number 2, he's like, but look at number 2. Look at what number 2 is. And I said, I can handle this for a week. It's not 3 years, Jim. It's not you going, so go to the desert, enjoy yourself, do the movie, have a good time. And I remember he stood there and he was like, really? And I said, yes, this is what makes sense. This is truly living our values. And it wasn't this big, horrible, where we went back and forth on it 22 times. It was very clear. And he felt good, and he went to the desert and he did his movie, and it was wonderful. And it helped everybody, and he felt good about it, and I felt good about it, because it was what we had decided together. Now, there are times when other things happen. I got offered a teaching job, teaching at a college in Illinois. And, it was a job I really would have liked. You know what I'm saying? And there was a hot minute where I was like, oh, should I take this job? And I got the manifesto out and I said, now is not the time. This is not the time. As much as I would like to do this, this doesn't get me where I want to be in 5 years. And where I want to be in 5 years is in a place where, as a parent, that I say that we did everything that we could for our son, and they did not have the ABA services in Illinois at that time that we wanted. So I said no to the job, and I've never, ever, ever regretted that at all. There are other times when stuff happens when you go, okay, wait a second, maybe my values are a little bit weird, or something happens that is more immediate. When my son was already done with therapy. Well, there's two examples, okay? There was the first time that something happened with my family. One of my family members, they had a baby, and the baby, they weren't sure if the baby was going to survive. And it was an urgent thing. And Jem had just started kindergarten, and he was in the middle of therapy, and that was super duper important. And in the moment, my husband and I said, this is happening right now, and I need to be there. I need to be there regardless of what happens. I need to be on the site. And he said, and I need to be there with you. And we felt that that was important enough that for a week, we pulled our son out of kindergarten. We'd fought so hard for him to get an aide, and the aide sat there for a week. I mean, it was really, but in the moment, my values said there is an urgent need in my family that I need to be there. I've never regretted that either. Now, it was a week. It wasn't a month, but it was a week. Later on, when my son was already out of therapy, but I had my job, which was important on the list. And, they said, your mother is not doing well. And this may be the last time that she feels well enough to be up to a visit. And we got on a plane because stuff happens. And so you don't look at the manifesto and go, I can't because of the manifesto. It's a guide. It is not the law. I put coins on there because I had an old friend who he would always do this thing. First of all, my dad, when I was younger and I was having trouble making a decision, my dad would make me like a list of the pros and the cons. If you do it, what are the pros? And if you don't do it, what are the things? And then what are the pros and cons both ways, if you do it or you don't do it. And then once you would get through the whole thing, he would make you talk it through with him. And then he would say, okay, so based on what you said, what do you think you should do? And I would say, oh, well, it's clear that the thing that I should do is this. And he would say, but what does your gut say now? And I would say, oh, well, my gut says to do the other thing. And he said, then you should follow your gut always. Make the list so that you understand what you're facing, but do what your gut says. Right? And I really think that that's amazing. And then this other friend of mine, he would, whenever I was having a hard time deciding something, he'd say, all right, let's just end this. And he'd pull out a coin. And the first time I didn't understand, but I was like, this is important. I'm not going to, flip a coin over this. But so he flipped the coin. He said, heads, you're doing it. Tails, you're not doing it. He does the thing. And he'd go, oh, okay, it says this. That's what you have to do. And you sit with it for a second and you go, okay, how do you feel? And then if it doesn't feel right, you do whatever you want to do. That's the whole thing. You don't go with what the coin flip says, but the coin flip helps you in that moment to know what you really want to do. Okay? So the manifesto is just the guide. It is not the law. You are not stuck doing what it says, and it can always be amended. Okay. Is that it? Is that my last slide? Okay. No. Good. Because letting some things go and letting some people go. Here's the problem. The reason why you're feeling stressed with the hectic schedule is that there are more things on it for you to do than are humanly possible. I know you're going to argue with me about that, but that's the truth. That is the absolute truth. Right now, you are expecting yourself to do and be for more people and more things than is possible. So you're going to have to let some things go. You're not going to do it all. And it's not forever. It's just for right now. So you got to make your peace with that. And there are some people and some things that are dragging you down right now. And they are not, if they're not on your list, why aren't they? So it might be, your sister who is, you used to go on vacations with your sister and go places. And now suddenly you have a child on the spectrum and your sister is saying, why aren't you going these places with me? And if it's not evident to her, you can try to explain it to her, but some people aren't going to get it. So I'm asking you, if there's something on the list that, somebody is saying you have to do and it's not on your list, why isn't it on your list? Because it's not now. And you might say, okay, well, I'm going to put it on the list. Thank you for reminding me. And that happens all the time. But if you didn't put it on the list and you don't feel like it needs to be on the list, or it needs to be number 42 on the list, which is not nothing, right? But 42 you're not going to get to this year. I'm sorry. You know I like to keep it real. You're not going to get to 42. You cannot be all things in all places. But if you said what's most important to you, you have to honor that for yourself. What is important to you? Because you really want to be asking yourself, where do you want to be in 5 years? Just like I said to myself, I want to be someone who knows that we did everything that we could for our son. It's going to get ugly and it's going to get bumpy. One of my very best friends, after Jem started his early intervention, was diagnosed with cancer. And talk about wanting to be 3 places at the same time. You know, I wanted to be there for her, and I wanted to be there for her family and for her kids, but I needed to be there for my son. And I had to do that. And there were some, like I didn't get to go to chemo with her because her chemo was at the exact same time that my son's clinic was. And that's just the way it worked out. And I had to choose between them. And for that, I chose to be at my son's clinic. You know, I won't say it didn't hurt the relationship, but you have to do what you have to do and you have to make your choices, right? I always said I made the choice to bring my son into this world, so I got to stand by him. And I want to stand by him, right? He has to take a priority. And that's hard for people around you. You will get guilt trips and you will get people who will try to manipulate you. You know what somebody explained to me, and I think this is from Maya Angelou, that when you are clear with someone about what your intentions are and what you want to do versus what you don't want to do, and they keep pressing you to do something else, that is manipulation. If you have stated clearly, so somebody says to you, I'm on the move again. Somebody says to you, hey, do you want to come to brunch? And you say, I would love to come to brunch, but I cannot come to brunch because that is the time that I've given myself every week to paint my toenails, right? And you've made it clear that that is what your choice is. And somebody says, oh, but you should come to brunch. And I'll tell you why you should come to brunch, because Betty's going to be there and you haven't seen Betty in forever. Okay, I'm not saying that they're a horrible person for saying that to you, but that is manipulation. That is someone saying, I heard you say what your boundary is, but I want you to do something else instead. People do this all the time. Again, it doesn't make them bad people, but I feel like it's important for us to acknowledge that is manipulation. It's someone trying to get you to do what they want you to do. And if you decide to change your mind and do what they want you to do, fabulous. Fabulous, but don't do it out of guilt and don't let go of the thing that you wanted to do out of a need to do what somebody else needs to do. Because here's the thing that I'm going to tell you from the very bottom of my heart, people aren't going to understand. You now have something new in your life that your child or someone you love is on the spectrum. And people aren't going to understand that. Even other people who have loved ones on the spectrum, we don't have the same experience. It's different for all of us. And so people aren't going to understand your boundaries. You need to cozy up to that and just accept that. And don't try to convince them. Don't try to sway them. Don't try to educate them. It's kind of a waste of time. But know that you know what you're doing. You've made it clear what you want to do and why you want to do it to yourself. And if somebody is pushing you to do something, you can choose to let them in if you want to, but don't expect them to think that what's number one on your list is right. They weren't at the meeting. They don't get a vote. And you don't have to convince them. You already decided. I just want to put that into your backpack, right? The phrase that I say all the time is other people's opinion of my parenting is none of my business. And I have to say it to myself almost on a weekly basis because people have opinions about my parenting. And boy, they are interesting opinions, but they weren't there. They didn't live what I lived. And they aren't living what you're living. Nobody is there with you at 3 o'clock in the morning when your child is smearing poo on the wall. They don't know the tears that you have cried, worrying about your child, and because nobody invited them to the birthday party. Nobody knows. Nobody but you, and sometimes your significant other knows a significant piece of it, but not always, right? Because sometimes you're the project manager and they're off at work. So let go of what other people think. Be on your path. You've decided what's important to you now. Now go after it. And go after it without the baggage of other people's guilt. Here's what I know about a lot of you. You're amazing, and people have counted on you, and people have expected you to be the person to show up for them. You're the good friend. You're the good sibling. You're the good child who takes care of your parents. You've taken care of people. I don't know why, but this like perfectly describes parents of kids on the spectrum. So many of you are those unselfless, you're selfless, not unselfless. You're selfless in the way that you've given to your community and your family and your friends, right? And now suddenly your child is on the spectrum and you need support and you need time and you need to be able to work the schedule for your child, right? But other people aren't going to stop needing and wanting you. They're going to ask you to do things. They're going to expect you to run the PTA bake sale. Your friend is going to say, can you please watch my children again? To this day, even though my life has changed exponentially, people still call me for help that do not have kids on the spectrum and will say, hey, I'm just wondering if you're available. I need a ride to the grocery store. And you know what? That's a compliment. That's a compliment that we're the people that people go to. But now we are a limited resource. And so you have to decide, and it's hard. It's hard to say no. We're all practicing. Nobody's perfect. We're works in progress. But you have to have that boundary, because if you're taking them to the grocery store, where's your child? What's your child doing? And there's nobody else for your child. If you're the project manager for autism, there's nobody else for your child. You're the person who's leading the charge, right? So count yourself as a limited resource. Get used to saying, I'm sorry, but that won't be possible. Or as my niece says, just say that won't be possible. Don't even say I'm sorry. Because are you really sorry that you have boundaries and that you're going to be focused now? It's going to be hard, and people are going to say things to you that are going to hurt your feelings. Like, my mother said to me, who are you? I don't even know who you are right now. And you know what I said to her? I said, I am my kid's mom, and I'm doing what's best for him. And I know that's hard for you, but that's what's happening right here. It's hard. It's hard because, everybody expects you to be there. And you may be there again. That may happen again. But right now, if you've prioritized your child's well-being and their therapy, you got to be there for that. Change is hard, but not living your values is harder. And that's the truth. Part of why it's so hard for you right now with your hectic schedule is that, and check me on this, tell me if I'm wrong, there are things on your schedule that you don't have room for anymore that you have not said, I can't do this. And I'm going to empower you right now today to find at least one thing on your schedule that you know in your heart you have to let go of. It doesn't mean that you can't be involved with the PTA, but maybe you say, this year I can't run the bake sale. And you deal with the disappointment from whoever it is that's standing over you and suggesting that you are the cause for all ill in the world because you won't run the bake sale. And people who are good at manipulation, they are fabulous at it, right? Which is why we have to get so clear on what are we doing, why are we doing it, what's your priority, what are your values. And we're going to talk on Thursday. I think that's the last slide, yes? We're going to talk on Thursday about managing the stress, because this is the other piece of this. There's the last slide. It's just a tape delay. I said, this is hard. Reward yourself, because it is. It's so hard. And there's a picture for those of you listening in podcast of, I don't know what that is, a steer with the horns, because I couldn't find a picture of a unicorn. I used to say to people people were like, well, you've just gotten so militant, Shannon. And I would say, no, I haven't gotten militant. I have a horn on my head and it's pointing north and I know which direction I'm going and that's where I'm going. And I'm not going to be swayed from it because I got a horn on my head. And that's how I always pictured myself. Just one unicorn horn and it was pointing towards helping my son. And I got singular of mind about it. And look, there were things that got backburnered. There are friends that I lost. There are arguments that I had with loved ones, right? I'm okay. I'm here, and that's important. So I started to say about the stress. So now that we've gotten to this point about the schedule, about how to manage the schedule and how to make a schedule that's driven by your values, then we got to manage the stress. Because that is the other part of it, that these people who want to take your time and are asking you to do things, stressful. Going here, there, and everywhere for your child, stressful, right? And so on Thursday, we're going to talk about how we deal with the stress and give you some very practical tips and suggestions about different things that work for people to manage the stress of it. Because think of that, the lavender fields. We know where we're going, but we need to make the journey enjoyable, right? And I will tell you, think about anything that you've been through that's been hard or even traumatic. Look, we've all just been through COVID, right? And I remember very distinctly saying to my husband, when, like, on a day when it was super stressful, when it was like, how is this all going to end? How and when is this the rest of our lives? Like, we didn't know. And I said to him, I just can't help but feel that there's going to be a day in our not too distant future where we're going to look back on this and there's going to be some element of this that we're going to go, oh, remember when we used to, whatever, during COVID, because we used to cook a lot during COVID. We're not doing that now. And, we used to make something called peanut butter pad thai and watch Game of Thrones because we'd never seen Game of Thrones. And I was like, someday we're going to look back at this and we're going to go, oh, remember when we ate peanut butter pad thai and watched Game of Thrones? And my husband was like, I don't think so. I don't think that day is ever coming where we're going to look back and romanticize it. And then the other day we watched the new version, the prequel, and I don't remember who it was, said, oh, remember when we used to eat peanut butter pad thai? And so we forget some of the hardest things until somebody reminds us when we go through something that's difficult. And what do we hold on to? We hold on to the memories that are safe. And we need to make sure that you're building those. What do I remember the most from when my child was doing early intervention for autism? I remember that when we would have the busiest day, we would put on just one song. After the last therapist left, before we sat down to eat dinner and started our evening ritual, we would put on one song, 2 minutes and 42 seconds, and we'd dance it out in the living room. And I have the most luscious, wonderful memories of that. Dancing as a family for 2 minutes and 42 seconds. That is what I remember on a daily basis now. If you ask me to and you bring something up, I can dredge up all the hard days. I can. But my brain remembers that. You got to make sure that you're making those memories happen too, because that helps with the stress. So we're going to take all of that on Wednesday's show. Tomorrow we have Dr. Doreen is here for for Ask Dr. Doreen. So that will be tomorrow. She'll be live. You can be sending in your questions right now. Each week now, we're going to start with a theme. We're going to take questions from everybody, but we're going to start with a theme. And tomorrow's theme is about diet. All the things within diet, like what's helpful, what's hard, selectivity, all of those things. So especially if you have questions about diet, but really questions about anything, we'll take those tomorrow. Hey, Renee and Elvira, love having you here. Sidonia, I'm sending you a hug. You're doing a good job. Okay, and Laurie sending you and Christina hugs too. Okay, so on Wednesday we're talking about that stress. And on Thursday, we have Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. Big stuff going on then. More on that in the future. So Wonderful. So thrilled that we had this time. And I hope you guys learned a little bit about how you can manage the schedule. But please, your homework is find something that is too much on your schedule and cancel that. Call whoever it is you have to call today and say, I have to take a break. I can't do that because you can't do everything. All right? You'll feel better afterwards. It'll feel like such a big relief. Yeah? All right, we'll be back tomorrow. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Bye-bye for now. If you found anything helpful in this video, please give us a like. In fact, make sure that you smash that subscribe button on YouTube and give us a like on Facebook. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Instagram for important updates. And please download our free podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much. See you next time.